I'm the ASMR psychologist. Welcome to this therapy session. Now, today, I'm going to show you how to calm, heal, and ultimately help yourself. Now, you can't really beat therapy, one-to-one therapy with a person who has been specifically trained to support and guide you through the various challenges that you might be facing. However, sometimes it is just not possible to access therapy for one reason or another. Life just gets in the way. So, I've developed this exercise to help you to think through issues in the way that you might in a therapy session with a trained professional. So it's kind of like self-help, I guess, but a really good type of self-help. Okay, so the first thing that you need to do, this is probably the biggest obstacle, is to find a time, a regular time each week where you can sit down for 15-20 minutes maybe to go through this technique, to practice this exercise. It can be the hardest thing to not just introduce something new into your routine, but then to keep it going. So, play around with it. Find a time. If it doesn't work, move it around, knowing that as long as you can sit yourself down at the same time every week, you're more than halfway there. Then, what I'd like you to do as a starting exercise every single time you sit down is to make sure that you are in the best possible place to help yourself. So we're going to do two things. first, and we can practice this now, is to switch off your sympathetic nervous system, the part of your nervous system that is energized when you are stressed, challenged in some way. They call it a fight, flight nervous system. And to switch on the parasympathetic nervous system, also called the rest and digest nervous system, so that you are feeling as calm as possible. It is easier to think clearly when you are calm. Now, the best way to switch between these two nervous systems or parts of your nervous system is using your breath. Just by changing the way you breathe, you can signal to your mind, which will then signal to your body, it's time to slow down, to relax. And one of the most effective breathing techniques is one in which you equalize your in-breath and your out-breath. So let's try that now. I want you to close your mouth gently so that you're just breathing in and out of your nose. This again signals to your body that it is time to relax. And I want you to count your inhale and your exhale. So, inhale for the count of 2, and exhale for the count of 2. Inhale, exhale, inhale for 2, exhale for 2. Okay. Now, if you're coming to your session particularly stressed out, feeling particularly uncomfortable, you might want to keep this breathing going on for a little longer, but I would suggest that you always do it. The second preparation exercise. Set a timer for 5 minutes, and this is really important because I don't want you to skip over this exercise. And then I want you to make a list of all the things that have gone well for you in the past week. And it's really important that you spend 5 minutes here, because to think through issues properly, we need all of our mind. And if you're having a bad day, a bad week, you're going to arrive at your self-therapy session with a very negative perspective. So this second warm-up activity is to open up your mind, give you access to everything you have. And you know, some weeks you might find that you're scratching around for good things, and it may be a list that just is about getting out of bed when you really didn't want to. But you know, some days that can be an achievement. So, 5 minutes there. Okay. Step 3. I then want you to set the timer again. Again, to make it fair, let's make it 5 minutes. You might not need that long, but this timer, I suppose, is to make sure you don't get stuck on this step. 5 minutes to make a list of all the things that have been bothering you during the week. Everything you can think of, written down on a piece of paper. Step 4. I want you to then rank those things in order of the distress, the discomfort they've been causing you. In order to do this, you might want to give each item a score out of 10 and then rank them accordingly. Step 5. Take the item at the top of your list, so the one that is or has been causing you the most distress and discomfort. And maybe sometimes that will feel too much to tackle that one. And if that's the case, you can just pick one you can face tackling. But the idea here is that you just pick one. This needs to be an achievable task, but also it's to highlight the fact that problems that really need resolving will still be there next time you sit down to do this session. But you'll also notice some of the other problems on your list will sort themselves out, even though that might feel quite impossible at the time that you write them down. Okay. Step 6. For this, I'm going to draw you a quick diagram. Which may be familiar to you if you have watched these sessions before. So, what I'm going to show you is a nice, simple way to understand our experiences, which then gives us a way of making a change if and when we need to. So, okay. diagram shows you how, when something happens, the event, have you ever thought about it? That thought determines then how we feel and what we do. There's some feedback links in there as well, you can see here. How we feel influences how we think. What we do influences how we feel, and also how we think. The reason I'm showing you this is I want you to take the problem you've identified and try and put it into this diagram. What is it that's happening? How are you thinking about it? How is that making you feel? And what does that make you do? This is to help with your understanding, but in the first instance, it's to help you to step back a little bit, to be more of an observer rather than a participant in what is going on. That creates a little bit of space which will enable you to think differently. I'm going to draw you another quick diagram as well, because once you've got that first diagram complete, you can then start to think about it in a different way. So, you have your event. And events in and of themselves don't necessarily cause us too many problems. It's the way we think about them that can create the difficulties. This is the challenge. And sometimes our thoughts sit on top of the challenge like a sticky film, making it harder to really see what's going on. So the next part of this exercise is about clearing this away, this sticky film away, so that you can more clearly see the challenge that you face. So, if we use an example, an argument maybe, with somebody, and you identify that your thought is, they're going to reject me, the relationship is over. This thought makes it very hard to think clearly about what to do next, the way forward. So, let's get that sticky film and clear it away. The way that you do that is to identify first all the pieces of evidence that support the idea or the thought that you will be rejected, and to write them down. So, for example, I've been rejected in the past. The person seems very angry with me. Maybe it just feels like this is what is going to happen. Next, you need to identify all of the evidence that would contradict this idea that you're going to be rejected. So, after most arguments, an amicable solution is found. If this is not the case, maybe this person is not the person I thought that they were. This person is often quick to anger, but also comes down to reason soon also. This is quite an important one to remember, I think. Feelings are not facts, however strong they are. Okay, then what I want you to do is get a card. These are just those index cards. I want you to write to yourself a little summary that pulls together the information you've highlighted. Another good tip when you're doing this, when you're writing your card, is to think, what would I say to a friend? What advice would I give them in this situation? So, let's have a think. You always think like this. Your insecurity in relationships stems from uncertainty, unpredictability in childhood. The reality is, you always find a way forward from a disagreement. And take your card and keep it close by. Reread it as often as you need to feel calmer. Now, what this does is it frees you up to think about the event without having to look at it through this thought that creates so much anxiety and discomfort. You can just think about the argument in a more straightforward way. And take some appropriate action. Maybe that is to allow a cooling off period before you offer an olive branch, or if it's more appropriate, use techniques to distract and soothe yourself, and wait to see what the other person does. The final step in this process is to set a time to review your actions. Maybe that is in your following week's therapy session, or maybe at another time if that seems more appropriate. And then maybe end as you began, with a few slow, equal breaths with your mouth gently closed, breathing through your nose. I found, at least, that this is the most effective way of changing your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviour outside of formal therapy. And the more you practice, the better you become at it. I hope that this was helpful. And I hope to see you soon.